The message had been clear, cold, and unyielding. The Galactic Council's ultimatum was delivered across all channels to Earth's government in an instant. The voices of the ancient, powerful species echoed in every communication terminal. It was not a request, but a demand. The Council's leaders were known for their cold, calculated way of ruling, and today they had spoken to humanity as if it were nothing more than an insignificant speck in the galaxy. Admiral Annabelle Wells stood in the command center of Earth's flagship, Independence, watching the holographic display of the Council's message. The room around her was filled with the best minds from every corner of Earth, but despite their vast intelligence, no one spoke a word. They all knew what was coming. The Council had given Earth an ultimatum: submit to their authority or face destruction. The voice of the Council leader, High Executor Zor, had rung through the room like a death knell. Humans are a young species, full of potential, but you are also dangerous and unpredictable. We have given you years to prove yourselves. Your time has run out. Comply with our terms, or your species will cease to exist. Annabelle felt a cold sweat run down her spine. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Zor was not the type to make idle threats. If Earth resisted, the galaxy's mightiest force would descend upon them. The terms were impossible. Earth was to surrender its independence, its technological advancements, and its military power. The Council would govern Earth, using humanity's resources for their own purposes. There would be no choice in the matter, no room for negotiation. As the message ended, the room was silent. Everyone, from the commanders to the scientists, was waiting for Annabelle's response. She had been the leader of Earth's defense for years, and now the fate of billions rested on her shoulders. The silence was finally broken by Commander Harper, a close friend and trusted officer. His voice was low but laced with tension. "Admiral, what do we do now? Do we submit? Do we give them everything they want?" Annabelle's gaze never left the screen. For a moment, she considered the offer. Earth's resources were limited. Their ships were still small compared to the massive fleets of the Council. The Council's technology was light years ahead of anything humanity had developed. Resistance would be foolish. Resistance could mean the end of everything. But Annabelle couldn't bring herself to accept that. She had seen humanity's strength. She had seen what they were capable of when pushed to the brink. She thought of the thousands of people across Earth, scientists, soldiers, workers, fighting every day to push humanity forward. Surrender was not an option. "No," Annabelle said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "We will not surrender. We fight." Harper raised an eyebrow. "But Admiral, the Council's fleet is—" "I know," she interrupted. "I know what we're up against. But humanity will not bend to anyone. Not the Council, not anyone. We've come too far to let them take everything we've built." She turned toward the large tactical display, and a hologram of the Council's fleet flickered into view. The scale of the threat was overwhelming. Ships that dwarfed Earth's strongest warships filled the display. The Imperium, a vessel the size of a small moon, sat at the center of the fleet. It was said to be able to destroy entire planets with a single shot. There was no way around it. Humanity's fleet was outmatched in terms of both size and firepower. But Annabelle didn't care. She knew that if Earth's forces fought smart, if they used every advantage they had, they could make a difference. They had something the Council didn't. They had human ingenuity. "We don't need to beat them head-on," Annabelle continued, addressing her officers. "We need to outsmart them. Our ships are smaller, faster. Our pilots are more agile. We know this galaxy better than anyone. The Council may have more power, but we have something they'll never understand. We have a reason to fight." Harper nodded, his expression serious but resolute. "So we fight then." Annabelle's gaze hardened. "We fight." The room was filled with a sudden sense of purpose. The officers and crew around her, who had once felt the weight of the Council's ultimatum heavy on their shoulders, now stood taller. There was no turning back. Earth would either rise or fall today, but they would not go down without a fight. As Annabelle looked out the viewport, she saw Earth, a small blue dot in the vast expanse of space. She thought of the people down there, unaware of the danger that loomed over them. They didn't know what was coming, but Annabelle did. She would not let them be enslaved by the Council, not without a fight. "The Council wants to destroy us," Annabelle said, her voice quiet but fierce. "Let them come. We'll show them that humanity is not so easily broken." The tension in the room was thick, but it was no longer fear. It was resolve. Humanity was at a crossroads, and this was their moment to prove that they belonged in the galaxy, not as pawns of the Galactic Council, but as a force to be reckoned with. "Prepare the fleet," Annabelle commanded. "We're going to show them what humanity is capable of." The moment the Council's ultimatum was rejected, the tension in the air was electric. On the command deck of Earth's flagship Independence, Admiral Annabelle Wells could almost hear the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. The battle ahead would not be easy, but there was no turning back. The Council would not take kindly to defiance. Their fleet, massive and menacing, was already on the move. But Annabelle wasn't concerned about the overwhelming firepower. Her concern lay in the spirit of humanity. If Earth's people could rally, they could at least give the Council a fight they'd never forget. The decision was made. Humanity would not surrender. As the flagship moved into position, Annabelle looked around at her crew. The officers and soldiers who had served with her for years were steeling themselves for what was to come. They knew that victory seemed impossible, but they also knew this: they had never backed down before, and they weren't about to start now. Humanity was untested on this scale, but the very idea that they would simply submit to the will of the Council felt like an insult. Earth had fought too hard to get to where they were, and if they had to fight to keep their place in the stars, then they would. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the news of the Council's demand spread quickly. In government halls and military bases, the high-ranking officials debated the options, but there was no real discussion. Surrender wasn't in their vocabulary. From the smallest child to the oldest veteran, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. People had no idea what would come next, but they knew one thing for sure: their leaders would not bend. The Council might think they could crush humanity, but they had no idea how deeply ingrained the will to fight was in Earth's people. At the command center, Annabelle's mind was racing. She could already see the Council's first wave of warships arriving, their enormous shadows blocking out the stars. The Imperium, the flagship of the Council's fleet, was like a moving moon, an impenetrable fortress of armor and weapons. But it was also a symbol of the Council's arrogance. They underestimated humanity at every turn, believing that sheer size and force would break Earth's resolve. They didn't understand that Earth's strength lay not in the size of their fleet, but in their creativity, their unpredictability, and their refusal to give up when everything seemed lost. Annabelle gathered her senior officers and addressed them with cold resolve. "We don't need to defeat the Council outright. We just need to make them realize we won't go quietly." Her voice cut through the tension in the room. It wasn't a call to arms. It was a call to survival. "We fight on our terms. We'll be quicker, smarter, and more dangerous than they could ever expect." As the fleet prepared for the first wave, Annabelle ordered the deployment of Earth's fighter ships. Smaller, faster, and more nimble, these ships had been designed for rapid strikes. They could dodge incoming fire and retaliate in ways the larger ships of the Council could not anticipate. It wasn't enough to win a full-scale war, but it was enough to make their presence felt. Annabelle wasn't foolish enough to think they could stand toe-to-toe with the Council's mighty armada. Instead, they would hit fast and hard, striking where the Council was weakest. The first battle began just as expected. Council warships dropped out of hyperdrive, their massive forms eclipsing the stars around them. They didn't immediately fire. They didn't need to. The Imperium was designed to strike fear into anyone who saw it, but the Council was mistaken in thinking that humans would simply cower. The Earth fighters darted in and out of the vast formations of enemy ships, targeting weak points and exploiting gaps in the Council's defenses. With every strike, humanity proved its tenacity. Their fleet was small, but their spirit was immense. There was no fear in the eyes of the soldiers on the command deck. Instead, there was hope, a hope that they could win this fight, not through sheer firepower, but through grit, skill, and the belief that they had a right to exist on their own terms. They wouldn't give in to the Council's will. No matter how many ships the Council sent, no matter how many casualties they took, Earth's people would keep fighting. As the day turned into night, and the stars filled with the explosions of battle, Annabelle didn't have time to dwell on the enormity of what was at stake. The fight was far from over. The Council was not backing down, and neither would humanity. It was only the beginning. They had sent their ultimatum. Now, humanity was sending its message in return. We will fight. We will survive. We will not kneel before you. The battle had only just begun, but already it felt like a desperate race against time. The Council's warships loomed in the distance, massive and imposing. The Imperium, with its near-invincible armor and energy shields, was the heart of the fleet, and it seemed to hold all the power in the galaxy. But Earth's forces, small and nimble, had a key advantage. They knew the terrain. They understood their environment in ways the Council never could. Admiral Annabelle Wells stood on the command deck of the Independence, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The battle had escalated quickly. Earth's fighters were engaging the Council's fleet at close range, weaving between the colossal warships, delivering strike after strike. The Independence itself, despite its relative size, had maneuvered into position to lead a counterattack against one of the Council's lighter dreadnoughts, hoping to take out a key target in the middle of the chaos. But every time they made a move, the Council adapted, reacting with precision. It was clear that this was not going to be a simple fight. It was a war of wits as much as it was one of weapons. Annabelle had always known that human ingenuity was Earth's greatest strength. But it wasn't until now, right in the middle of this fight, that she truly appreciated how far humanity had come. They had been underestimated for too long. The Council thought they could crush Earth with one blow, but they had no idea what they were up against. Each human ship, each fighter, each soldier was determined to prove the galaxy wrong. Every move they made was calculated. Every blast from their weapons was designed not just to damage the enemy, but to outthink them. They were playing a different game altogether. Annabelle's thoughts were interrupted by Commander Harper's voice, sharp and urgent. "Admiral, we've got a new fleet on the radar. Half a dozen more Council ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're bringing in reinforcements." The battle had already been overwhelming, but now it was turning into a true test of endurance. The Council's reinforcements weren't just more ships. They were heavily armored ships designed for heavy bombardment, and they were headed straight for Earth's lines. "We need to act now," Annabelle muttered to herself. The Independence was already taking fire, its shields flickering under the pressure. "Harper, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Full speed ahead toward their rear flank." Her plan was simple. Earth's fleet needed to keep the Council off balance. They couldn't take on their enemies head-to-head. Not yet, but they could distract them, make them second-guess their every move. "We're going in full force," Annabelle said, turning to her communications officer. "Send the message to all ships. Disrupt their formations. Keep them chasing us. And make sure the reinforcements know that they're walking straight into a trap." For the next few minutes, the Independence and the other Earth ships sped toward the incoming reinforcements, launching full-speed attacks on their weakest points. They dodged incoming fire from the Council's cannons, cutting through space with breathtaking agility. Each attack was precise. The smaller ships, using their superior speed, swooped in and out of enemy formations like birds of prey, creating disarray among the much larger and slower Council ships. It was chaos, but it was humanity's kind of chaos. Then, in a stroke of unexpected brilliance, Earth's fighters began releasing decoy drones, small, but advanced pieces of technology designed to mimic their ship's energy signatures. These drones were far more than simple distractions. They emitted fake signals, creating false readings of Earth's fleet, leading the Council ships to waste valuable energy on nothing more than empty space. It worked. The Council's reinforcements, confused and frustrated, split their fire between the drones and the real ships, giving Earth's forces the chance to strike harder. The pressure that had been crushing them just moments ago began to ease. The battle was still intense, but now there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were starting to win. As the Independence took another hit from a Council destroyer, Annabelle's eyes never left the battlefield. The explosions lit up the darkness of space, each one a reminder of the stakes. They couldn't afford to lose this fight. But, as much as the odds were stacked against them, Annabelle felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Confidence. They were starting to beat the Council at their own game. Humanity wasn't just a small, fragile species. They were smart, they were fierce, and they were united in their resolve. In the midst of the chaos, Annabelle received a message from Earth's command center. The message was brief, but it was enough to remind her of why they were fighting. "We're with you, Admiral. Humanity will not be enslaved. Whatever happens next, we'll stand together." Annabelle clenched her fists. There was no turning back now. Earth's fleet wasn't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity, for the right to exist on their own terms. "Commander Harper, we need to get to the Imperium," Annabelle said, her voice filled with purpose. "We're going after their flagship." The Council may have underestimated humanity at first, but now it was clear. Earth wasn't just a pawn in this fight. They had just begun to show the galaxy what they were capable of. And the battle for humanity's future was far from over. The battle intensified as Earth's fleet maneuvered around the Council's ships, engaging them with a newfound ferocity. The Independence, though smaller and less heavily armed than the massive Council warships, was proving to be a force to be reckoned with. Annabelle Wells, standing at the command console, gripped the edge with white knuckles as the ship lurched with every blast. The sound of alarms echoed throughout the bridge, but the crew remained focused. Every second mattered. Every maneuver could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. "Commander Harper, status report," Annabelle called out, her voice steady but urgent. Harper's face, illuminated by the glow of the tactical display, was tight with concentration. "Admiral, we've taken some damage, but we're holding. The Council's reinforcements are stronger than anticipated, but they're starting to falter. We've got them off balance, but we need more time." Annabelle's mind raced. She knew that time was a luxury they didn't have. The Council's ships were massive, their weapons far superior to anything Earth had developed. But the advantage they had was humanity's unpredictability, their ability to adapt and think outside the box. If they could just hold the line long enough, Earth's fighters might have a chance to strike at the heart of the Council's forces, the Imperium, their flagship. "We can't wait for more time," Annabelle said, making a quick decision. "We go after the Imperium now. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will crumble." "Are you sure, Admiral?" Harper's voice was filled with concern, but Annabelle could see the resolve in his eyes. "That's a suicide mission. The Imperium is the strongest ship in their fleet, and it's surrounded by their best defense forces." "I'm not asking for permission, Commander," Annabelle said, her tone hardening. "We go now while they're distracted. We'll send everything we have at them. Earth doesn't have the luxury of playing it safe." Harper nodded, his jaw set in grim determination. He knew better than to question the Admiral's orders. He turned toward the communications officer and began relaying the order to the rest of the fleet. On the surface, everything looked like chaos, but to Annabelle, it felt like a beautiful, desperate dance. Humanity's ships darted and weaved, distracting the Council's forces, and for a brief moment, Annabelle saw something in the Council's ships that sent a surge of confidence through her chest. Hesitation. For all their advanced technology, they didn't understand humanity's resolve. And now, they were beginning to realize just how much Earth was willing to risk to stay free. The Independence veered sharply to the left, dodging another barrage from a nearby dreadnought. The ship's engines roared as they accelerated toward the Imperium. The entire fleet followed suit, diving into the heart of the enemy lines, weaving between the towering warships. They were flying straight into the lion's den. "All fighters, form up," Annabelle barked. "We're going straight for the Imperium. Disable its engines and shields. We need to create an opening for the rest of the fleet to follow in." "Understood, Admiral," came the voices of the fleet's commanders. The Earth fighters, agile and nimble, zoomed in behind the larger ships, picking off the smaller vessels in their path and creating a gap in the Council's defenses. It wasn't an easy task, but humanity was not afraid of a challenge. They had nothing to lose. Annabelle's eyes locked onto the Imperium, the beast at the center of the battlefield. It loomed like a silent titan, its sleek, dark surface gleaming as it swiveled to bring its weapons to bear on the approaching fleet. She could see the heat radiating from its cannons, ready to destroy anything that dared come too close. But humanity wasn't coming in quietly. As Earth's fleet surrounded the Imperium, they launched a full-scale assault. Missiles and laser fire erupted in a brilliant storm, and the space around the Council flagship was consumed by explosions. The Imperium's shields flared up, but they weren't designed to handle the rapid, unpredictable strikes coming from Earth's ships. Annabelle could feel the excitement building in the pit of her stomach. The Imperium's shields began to flicker, the immense energy draining faster than the flagship could replenish. "We've got an opening," Harper shouted from the tactical station. "The Imperium's shields are failing. Now's our chance." Annabelle's heart raced as she gave the order. "Full assault. All ships, focus fire on their engines. We're taking them out." The fleet obeyed without hesitation. Fighters swooped in, releasing volley after volley of concentrated energy blasts, aiming directly at the heart of the Imperium. The massive flagship shook with the force of the hits, and soon the once untouchable ship began to falter. The Council's best defenses were starting to crumble, but they weren't out of the woods yet. The Imperium retaliated with an overwhelming barrage of fire, its cannons charging with immense power. Earth's ships were quick to dodge, but the Independence took a heavy hit, its shields flaring under the strain. The massive explosion rocked the flagship, and Annabelle's grip tightened on the console. "We can't take much more of this," Harper warned. "If we don't finish this soon, we'll lose our advantage." Annabelle clenched her teeth. She couldn't afford to fail now. She couldn't afford to give up. Not when Earth was so close to winning this battle. "Keep firing," she ordered. "We're not retreating. We're taking that ship down." As the battle raged on, Annabelle's focus was absolute. The Imperium began to flicker on the tactical display, its energy systems faltering. The energy output from its weapons decreased. The shields were down. Humanity had done it. They had broken through the invincible. "Target the engines," Annabelle commanded one last time. "Give them everything we've got." In that moment, humanity's fury and determination were unleashed in a final powerful strike. The Imperium exploded into a mass of fire and debris as Earth's fighters poured everything they had into the ship's vulnerable core. The destruction was massive, and for a brief second, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then the silence hit. For the first time, the Council felt fear, and humanity knew it had just taken its first step toward victory. The silence that followed the destruction of the Imperium was deafening. It felt as if the entire galaxy had paused, holding its collective breath. Earth's fleet, battered but unbroken, hovered in the stillness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of the Council's flagship. The once imposing ship was now a cloud of debris, its massive frame reduced to fragments floating in the dark void. Annabelle Wells stood motionless in front of the command console, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The battle was far from over, but they had struck a significant blow. The Council had underestimated humanity for far too long. Now they had no choice but to face the consequences. Admiral. Commander Harper's voice cut through the silence, his tone laced with both relief and caution. We did it. The Imperium is gone. The Council's fleet is in disarray. We've won this engagement. Annabelle's eyes were narrow with focus, but she knew Harper was right. The Imperium had been the cornerstone of the Council's dominance in the galaxy, and its loss had sent shockwaves through their ranks. But while this was a victory, it was only one battle in a much larger war. The Council would not surrender easily. They would fight to the last ship, the last soldier, and the last bit of hope they had left. Not yet, Annabelle replied, her voice calm but firm. This is just the beginning. We've shaken their confidence, but we haven't won the war. The Council will regroup, and they'll come for us harder than before. But for now, we have the advantage. Let's use it. Harper nodded, his expression hardening with the same resolve that had gotten him through every challenge before. I'll get the fleet moving. We've got the momentum. Admiral. The command bridge was buzzing with activity as the crew of the Independence worked quickly to assess the damage. Several systems were down, but the ship was still operational. Outside, Earth's fleet continued to push forward, their enemies in retreat for the first time in what felt like an eternity. But as the ships maneuvered into a new formation, Annabelle couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Council was retreating, but they weren't defeated. They were regrouping, organizing, and preparing to strike back. The Independence shook as another blast hit its shields, jolting Annabelle from her thoughts. Report, she barked. We've got another wave of reinforcements. Admiral, came the voice of the sensor officer. It's bigger than the last one. They're not retreating. They're regrouping for a final push. Annabelle's mind raced. The Council would come at them with everything they had. This was their last chance to end the war in their favor. Earth's fleet was strong, but not invincible. The Independence was limping after the battle with the Imperium, and they couldn't afford to take another hit like that. We can't let them regroup, Annabelle said, her voice cold with determination. Prepare to engage. Target their command ships. If we can't destroy them all, we need to make sure we eliminate the leadership. She turned to the communications officer. Send word to the rest of the fleet. We fight until the last ship. No retreat. The officers around her exchanged uneasy glances, but they didn't question her orders. They knew the stakes, and they knew what was at risk. The Independence lurched forward again, leading the charge into the heart of the Council's new formation. Humanity had already made its mark, but now they needed to deliver the finishing blow. The Earth ships, battered but determined, swarmed toward the Council's regrouping fleet, bringing every weapon to bear. The first wave of Council ships opened fire, their massive cannons charging up, intent on tearing Earth's fleet apart. But humanity had learned. They had learned from the past mistakes, and now they fought not just with weapons, but with intelligence, agility, and a deep, unwavering belief in their cause. The battle raged on. Earth's fleet dodged and weaved, their ships moving like a deadly swarm of insects around the much larger, slower Council vessels. Missiles streaked through the void, and energy blasts illuminated the darkness of space like fireworks, creating a deadly light show that was both beautiful and terrifying. Annabelle watched as their fighters launched into the fray, weaving in and out of enemy lines. The Independence was holding its own, firing every weapon it had at the enemy. The Council ships were powerful, but humanity had learned how to exploit their weaknesses. Minutes passed, then hours, as the battle stretched on. But there was a shift in the tide. The Council's fleet began to break apart, its ships falling one by one, their ranks scattered, their coordination lost. Earth's fleet was relentless, never faltering in their attacks, never losing hope. The Council had underestimated humanity's will to survive. Annabelle's eyes never left the tactical screen as she gave orders, watching as the last of the Council ships fell, their engines destroyed, their command structure in disarray. It was a hard-fought victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the final council ship exploded in a burst of light, a silence fell over the battlefield. The war was far from over, but this battle, this pivotal moment, had been won. Humanity had struck back, and the Council was no longer the galaxy's unchallenged power. "We've done it," Harper said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Annabelle didn't respond immediately. She let the weight of the victory sink in. They had struck back, not with brute force, but with something far more powerful: their unity, their ingenuity, and their refusal to be broken. But even as she allowed herself a moment of triumph, she knew this was just one victory in a long, brutal war. The Council would not stop, but humanity wouldn't stop either. And as long as she stood at the helm of the Independence, Earth's fight for freedom, for their future, would continue, no matter the cost. The battle was not over. The silence that followed the final destruction of the Council's fleet was a fleeting moment of peace, a brief respite in the middle of an ongoing war. Humanity had struck back, but the Council was a force too vast, too powerful, to be destroyed in a single engagement. Even now, as Earth's fleet hovered in the midst of the wreckage, there was no time to celebrate. There was only the quiet knowledge that this victory was only a temporary reprieve. Annabelle Wells stood on the bridge of the Independence, looking out at the remains of the Council's once unshakable fleet. Despite their success, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what was still to come. The Council was not finished. They would return. And when they did, they would be stronger than ever. The fight for humanity's survival had just begun. "Admiral," Commander Harper's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got reports coming in from the other fleets. We've broken their lines, but the Vanguard and the Judicator, the two largest fleets, are still intact. We're not finished yet." Annabelle nodded. She had already suspected as much. The Imperium may have been destroyed, but that wasn't the end of the Council's plans. They were methodical, patient, and unyielding. If anything, this defeat would only serve to fuel their rage. "How long before their reinforcements arrive?" she asked. "We've got a few hours, at most," Harper replied, a hint of worry in his voice. "Their communication network has been damaged, but they're still able to call in backup. The Vanguard is mobilizing, and the Judicator is already moving into position. We can't let them regroup." Annabelle's gaze shifted to the tactical map. The dots of Earth's fleet scattered across the galaxy like small, fragile beacons of resistance. The Council's forces were vast, stretching across several systems, and they had the manpower and the firepower to destroy everything humanity had built in a single crushing blow. Earth's forces were far smaller, but they were driven by something the Council couldn't comprehend: an unwavering will to survive, to fight, and to win. "We won't let them regroup," Annabelle said, her voice firm. "Send word to the rest of the fleet. We're not retreating. We're going after the Vanguard." Harper raised an eyebrow. "The Vanguard? Admiral, that's their elite fleet. If we go after them now, we'll be facing them with half strength." Annabelle turned toward him, her expression hard. "I don't care. They hit Earth. They hit our families, our cities, our homes. They think they can crush us with their power. But they're wrong. Humanity doesn't break. We fight back. We hit them now, while they're vulnerable, while they're reeling from the loss of the Imperium. We take the fight to them." Harper swallowed but nodded. "Understood, Admiral." The crew moved swiftly, executing Annabelle's orders. Ships began to move into position, maneuvering with precision. The Independence remained at the center of the fleet, its weapons charged and ready for the fight ahead. Annabelle couldn't afford to hesitate. If she did, Earth would lose the advantage. The time for waiting was over. As the fleet began its approach toward the Vanguard, Annabelle thought of everything humanity had endured. The Council's ultimatum, their threats, their brutal enforcement of galactic control. For too long, humanity had been oppressed, treated as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. But now the tables were turning. Now it was the Council who would face the consequences of their actions. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their freedom, their future, and their place in the galaxy. They had shown the Council that they would not be intimidated, that they would not bow to an alien empire. The Vanguard's ships loomed in the distance, their dark hulls gleaming ominously under the distant light of a nearby star. The fleet was large, far larger than Earth's forces, but they had underestimated the human resolve. With their powerful weapons and overwhelming numbers, they believed they could crush humanity's last hope in a single strike. But Annabelle had no intention of letting that happen. "Full speed ahead," she ordered. "All ships, focus on the Vanguard's command ships. We take down their leaders first, then we'll deal with the rest. We need to cripple their coordination." Harper nodded and relayed the orders to the rest of the fleet. The ships shifted formation, coming together like a fist ready to strike. The Independence was in the lead, flanked by Earth's best fighters, all of them determined to do whatever it took to win. The battle began in an explosion of light and energy. The Vanguard ships opened fire immediately, their weapons charging with immense power. Earth's fleet dodged and returned fire, their smaller, faster ships darting through the barrage with expert precision. The Independence unleashed its full arsenal, hammering away at the Vanguard's defenses. For a moment, it seemed like Earth's fleet might be overwhelmed. The Council's ships were massive and well-coordinated, their firepower relentless. But Annabelle could see something, small cracks in their formation, tiny signs that the Vanguard wasn't as invincible as they appeared. Annabelle's voice was steady, but filled with an intensity that matched the battle around her. "Commander Harper, focus on their shields. We need to break through and create an opening for our fighters. The Council won't stop, but we won't stop either." The Independence fired once more, its energy beams cutting through the enemy fleet like a hot knife through butter. One by one, the Vanguard ships began to falter, their shields weakening under the sustained assault. "We're making progress, Admiral," Harper said. "They're starting to lose their coordination. We're breaking their line." Annabelle smiled grimly. Humanity wasn't done yet. They had fought too hard to give up now. As the Vanguard's fleet began to disintegrate, Earth's fleet pressed forward with renewed strength. Annabelle knew that the battle for freedom wasn't over. But today, humanity had proven something to the galaxy, to the Council, that they would not go down without a fight.